Good morning, mi gente. This is your host, Collazo, and you're watching and listening to Found in Translation Talk Show, the talk show that stacks truth about politics and today's hottest issues. Thank you so much for joining us. You're watching Found in Translation live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And of course, from our Ride or Dies, you're listening to the Found in Translation podcast. Anyway, you can download a podcast or as a radio program at WPPMOP 106.5 FM. Well, I had to give y'all what you want. As you can see from my background today, we're going to give you a quick recap of the South Carolina primary debate. Another rabble rouser, another rum shaker down in the dirty South yesterday. So I want to let y'all know what our big picture takeaways are, how I think the individual candidates do, and is it going to matter at the end of the day? What are we going to see not only in the South Carolina primary, but also going into Super Tuesday? Because you're less than a week away from 40% of the delegates, over a third of delegates being distributed. Again, there's your host, Ray Collazo. You can check us out on social media at FIT_talk show, FIT_talk show. We really appreciate our loyal followers that have been real supportive of the Found in Translation movement, particularly since my television appearance on Alicia Menendez show on MSNBC, the warm wishes for us not only providing people this valuable information and bringing people to the conversation that you need to know about, but also like Carlos Cardona, another activist that have been on the show in the last few weeks to discuss these very important elections and political development, but also this personal journey that I'm on. So we really appreciate you all supporting the movement here at Found in Translation. So I wanted to give y'all my analysis of where we're at, where the candidates are at, and also big picture. So the big picture, 3 takeaways that I have from last night's debate in South Carolina. The first one is I struggle with it if the disorganization in such an important, critical debate right before the South Carolina primaries, right before Super Tuesday, and when many of the people in America, frankly, are just now starting to pay attention, the disorganization in that first segment and the total lack of control of the moderators, venerable journalists, television personalities like Gayle King and Norah O'Donnell just had no control of the first 20 minutes of the debate. I fear that many people just turned it off when they saw a WWE match, a cage match breaking out on national television and didn't see the more substantive conversations that took place, particularly when they brought in the bullpen, the other reporters that are not as famous, but did a lot better job of not only bringing substantive conversation to the debate, but also being better on time. So I just wonder if the effectiveness or how much penetrates with that first segment being so disorganized and that potentially turning people off. The second thing is, the difference between 5 candidates that we've had in some of the debates in the last few months as the field is whittled down, and 7 doesn't sound like a lot, but it really cut into the time, and it just gave people less time to discuss it, but also it just created this more desperate situation. People wanted to get their conversation out, and particularly since we're really coming up on it. Super Tuesday is the last debate before Super Tuesday, and it's really a time to this is it for most of the candidates, frankly. So we'll see what's going to happen, and then the last thing is I don't know how much of it matters at this point. I just don't know. I just don't know how much of it matters. In California, a third of people already voted through vote by mail. People are voting in Texas as we speak, literally as we speak. There's just a lot of, I just don't know how much it's going to matter at the end of the day. Certainly for most of the candidates. I think a few, which I'll talk about in a second, still are in the game. So let's get into what went down. Let's start with Sanders. So night. Obviously, people are going to talk about the Cuban stuff, which he needs to figure out a lot better way to talk about. He needs to leave that alone, frankly. That is not good politics for anybody. And, I know what he's trying to get at. And there was actually some moments I thought of pretty brave conversation, which I appreciated around not only noting how the United States had impacted Latin American policy in the countries like Iran and Chile and fomented dissension, but also his bravery around talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And actually, Bloomberg, to his credit, actually also discussed it in a way that I thought was, under normal pretext, is pretty progressive stuff. I think the bottom line, though, is that you know some of the ability for Sanders in a general election to energize not only his core base of progressives and people of color, but also suburban, basically suburban white women that are sort of that find the president distasteful, even though they haven't experienced personally any much negative impacts um, on his during these last 3 years, is an open question, and I think will remain an open question during this candidacy. But the bottom line is, he has at this point the biggest coalition as it relates to working people and people of color. And there's only two candidates in this race that have any connection with people of color, that being Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden. So they're really the only ones that have any really legitimate argument to creating the potential coalition that we would need to win, despite what some of the other ones say. Could a Klobuchar engage suburban women better than Sanders? Sure, but she has nothing else. So that's part of the dynamic here. So I think the substance, particularly around combating this concept, I thought Sanders was best talking about how his ideas around income inequality and getting and healthcare being a human right, and these not being radical, and being people being able to afford college are not radical ideas. So I think when he stayed grounded in his sort of core meta argument around his ideology, I think it was very effective. But when he starts diving into details and veering off into the progressive, super lefty, old school hippie wilderness, I think it does turn people off. And certainly a discussion around, relitigating Castro is not only not helpful, but it's not relevant to 2020, frankly. So the quicker we can get into some of the real issues impacting this race, and people that are going to be voting in the fall, are going to be is going to loom well for Sanders, but certainly nothing fatal, nothing particularly harmful to him. In terms of who I thought did the best theory of the case for being the moderate alternative, I think it was Senator Klobuchar. Her answer around the challenges impacting rural health access was fantastic. She's one of the two people that brought up comprehensive immigration reform. And I like the idea that she brought it up in the context of it being not only a moral, but economic imperative. Senator Sanders brought it up more from the moral dimension. And so I thought both of them, thankfully, brought it up because the moderators didn't. But I thought she was very effective overall. And she even got into legalize the marijuana conversation, which was good to hear finally someone bring that up as a topic in these debates. Problem with Klobuchar is that her coalition is really limited. I mean, she really is an upper Midwest northern candidate, and she keeps talking about she's the one that can, win these Senate races. She brought up this Colorado race, the Arizona race. Okay, yes, those are very important, but the most important factor in those races are Latino voters, and she's nowhere with them. So I think the idea that she's the candidate for the Midwest and the upper tier, sure, but. And you could argue that's all that matters, frankly, on some level. You could argue that. But, she's not going to bring the entire coalition together. None of them can. And Sanders, at this point, clearly has the best argument of any of them. But I thought she was the one that best articulated that vision and looked very strong in the debate last night. It's a good night for Vice President Biden. If you weave through the clunkiness and his lack of being able to bring up a lot of sort of clarity around his arguments, I thought he was particularly strong. He really gets thrown off by the moderators in these discussions, and the timing and those kind of dynamics. But when he brought up issues like having a black woman be nominated to the Supreme Court, which is something that in sort of those elite black legal circles has sort of stuck in the craw for Obama not giving a black woman one of those opportunities, even though they love Sonia. But that is something that has been something discussed in those sort of elite legal circles. And he brought up gentrification, which I thought was strong and didn't go over the top, even though the first thing he said around, well, why for black voters, you brought up that his connection with the black community was borderline patronizing, but the The patronizing of black people, I thought, could have been a lot worse today overall, and particularly with Biden. Um, Senator Warren was not focused. Love her, but this, she needs to leave Bloomberg alone because he's not the problem. And she's really bringing up, she really is not spending enough time focusing on why she's the best candidate in the race. And she started doing that with Sanders, but I think she needs to show it more than talk about it, if that makes sense. And the leadership, the precious time that there was, any moment she was doing attack on Bloomberg, who I think kind of can look like an out of touch billionaire on his own, I think takes away from the strong message that she has. And she should have been making this case against Sanders months ago. And that's kind of the problem, because she really is now trying to recoup the progressive lane when Sanders' base is pretty solidified, and her base is solidified. I mean, she cut into it a third. So it's not like this strategy didn't bear any fruit. He was getting 40% of the vote before. Now he's getting 25, 30. She's getting 15. So it's not like it didn't have any merit, but now she's going to have to build a coalition across the ideological spectrum. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And like I said, I think essentially her campaign's over. I know the math of the situation. There's nothing in the polling telling me she's going to index ahead of even Bloomberg and Biden in the polls on Tuesday. And I think it's really important that after Tuesday, she makes some strategic decisions around how, if and when she's going to support Sanders, and how and she helps him sort of broaden his base of support. Watching and listening to Ray Collazo on Founded Translation, breaking down the Palmetto State, the South Carolina primaries family. Let's talk about Buttigieg for a second. I think Buttigieg, look, he's probably arguably the best communicator in the group in terms of breaking out his vision in a coherent manner. And he's got a lot of future. But I think tonight, to me, and I think this has been happening as he's gotten on the stage more, while his pitch is impressive, solid, it's a good argument for those that are scared by Sanders, sort of democratic socialist brand. But the reality is that I think he's showing tonight, to me, was a lot of rhetoric and not a lot of substance. And I think his lack of resume is really showing him. You can't equate things you did as a mayor of the town and city of Camden, a little bigger than Camden or Allentown, with all due respect, or Upper Darby, to some of these national and international leadership moments that the senators have had, the vice presidents had, and even Mayor Bloomberg have had. And so I think even Steyer's had, sort of leading national campaigns with his own money. So I think to me, that lack of resume really showed tonight. And look, and there's nothing about what he said tonight that's going to increase his base. I mean, people like him. He could end up being the moderate alternative, could end up finishing second or being there at the end. But the polling's not telling me that. Even though he'll still be able to raise some money to stay in the race, and he's impressive, and he's sort of winning on like the debate, on the debate. How would you say, sort of in debate club, from a debate club perspective. It was very rhetorical tonight to me. Mayor Bloomberg, better. We can argue the education stuff, but I thought he had a strong answer and showed some competency in it. Obviously, the charter school piece is very controversial for New Yorkers, and how he, and that's become big business in a way that's very disturbing at all. But I think he showed some competency, and he showed that, look, this guy's obviously got some faults. He obviously is really hard to connect with. Not much personality there. The jokes were horrible. It was forced. You could tell there's people in the audience that get paid to clap for him. I think there was some reporting on that on social media. But the guy is a competent guy. And in the areas that he has a particular connection with, can articulate a vision, and particularly in his accomplishments in those areas as it relates to education or gun reform and environmental issues. So, it remains to be seen. We'll see how can money buy him love, because he really is banking on, and he's only one of two candidates, him and Sanders, that can be competitive from blanketing the media in the Super Tuesday states on Tuesday. Steyer, God love him, had some strong moments, I thought, as it relates to talking about, hey, he was the one sort of in front on impeachment, was the only one that discussed reparations, which obviously South Carolina is can have potentially could have a certain appeal. And he's made a lot of investment and time in his campaign um, to engage the South Carolina electorate. This is sort of his last stand. So we'll see how that resonates. It's possible in some of the polling he could finish third. And how does that portend to, a bump for Super Tuesday? Obviously, it's a very long shot, but I think Steyer at least shows that he cares and is passionate about these issues, but he does come off more like a patron of the process and a supporter of the party and supporter of aggressive values than like a leadership candidate, if that makes sense. I don't think he's made even his business argument as strong as he could have. And now he's got a bigger businessman on the stage. So Tachiata says hello. Hey there. Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, T. And so where are we left? I think the biggest winners, really quickly, were the backup moderators. They're the ones that not only controlled the debate, but talked about some real issues that we haven't heard much in this campaign: housing, foreign policy, education, pot, gun control, the conversation around the boyfriend, closing the boyfriend loophole, which something one of our collaborators, Christina Vega from the Love Hurt Shouldn't Hurt campaign, is very passionate about and does a lot of advocacy around. So it was great to see Klobuchar and Biden and others chiming in on that very important, nuanced issue. We actually, thank God Black people weren't totally patronized. I was so worried. There was only one Martin Luther King reference, I think. There was a Nelson Mandela reference. But, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. And even Buttigieg and some others acknowledge, hey, it's not lost on us. It's 7 white people sitting around talking about civil rights issues. But I thought some of the equity conversation, there was some substance, and Warren in particular, as always, kind of threw in, made sure that was front and center in her comments. So overall, interesting. Could have touched on veterans issues and some other issues related that are more kind of South Carolina specific. That was an opportunity to talk about how immigration has impacted South Carolina in a positive way. And anyone that's vacation in Myrtle Beach or in South Carolina knows there's a growing Latino population, growing immigrant population that is really helping the economy, particularly in the resort and sort of tourism industries, and housing and construction. So there could have been more nuance around that conversation, but nevertheless, I thought the setting was better acknowledged in South Carolina than it was in Nevada, even though they didn't have, I don't think they had like a Nevada specific commentator, a South Carolina specific journalist ask a question, which I thought was that they had like John Ralston, my main man, North Carolina, my man David Rodriguez, who needs CNN and NBC. We have found in translation. Well, mil gracias, hermano. I appreciate that, brother. Thank you for the commentary, and we appreciate everyone supporting the movement here at Found in Translation. Finally, they're already voting in California, my friends. They're already voting in Texas. This is what I see. I thought the most important thing I saw last night wasn't the debate. It was before I went to bed. I was going to do this last night, but I had some technical issues. Was the polling that Steve Kornacki and MSNBC broke down. And so I didn't realize that Biden is more competitive in the polling than I suspected. And so what I saw was, I think, sort of Bernie's a little bit ahead, 2 or 3 points ahead of Biden everywhere, more or less. So that to me feels like, and then Bloomberg's a little behind that. So that means it seems like after Super Tuesday, we'll probably have a final 3, 2 of which have some shot with minority voters, Biden and Sanders, right? And that because we have many of the southern states voting, they're not as big and not as rich in delegates, but they're not tiny states. Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi. So we have a lot of southern states that potentially Biden could leverage a victory Saturday, which I think will probably win South Carolina, even if it'd probably be by 2-3 points. Could he potentially do a sweep on Tuesday? And even though Bernie beats him in the western states, like a Colorado or Texas, and in New England, which I'm sure he's going to win Massachusetts, in some of those areas, does that sort of set up a 2 or 3 person matchup And does that give Biden some life? The challenge with Biden is the money. The bottom line is the best person to beat Sanders at this point would be Biden if Buttigieg could be a spokesperson and Bloomberg could be his bank account. That's really the issue, is that you really have you do have a lot of people, roughly half the people in the party, that are going to be voting that would not prefer Sanders. But the issue is he's out to organize all these people in this jumbled field, and he's got the most passionate base of anybody. Biden's support, even in his best moments, and I like Vice President Biden a lot personally, and he's done a lot for our country and done a lot for my local Philadelphia area here regionally. Where's the passion for Joe Biden? That's really the challenge. And at this point, it looks like he may be, if he had the money, which I don't think he'll have the money, but if he had the money, would probably be at this point the only one in position to knock Sanders out. If and when the other moderate candidates get out the race pretty immediately. But it seems like from the polling I saw last night, Sanders may not be able to build up as big a lead unless California goes completely over the top for him, which is very possible, my friends. And that would be because of that youth Latino community and that youth progressive base that he's been really almost singularly cultivating in California, or had the resources to fully do. I know Buttigieg and Warren have had some efforts, but not the way Bernie's had in Cali. So Cali's going to be very important. Texas is going to be important. I was with some leadership in Texas earlier this week in the Valley and at Harlingen, McAllen, Texas community. It's all Bernie down there. So he's the one doing the organizing. He's the one that's got the energy. So we'll see. Can a performance in the southern states and competitive performances in Texas and one or two of the other big western states keep Biden in the game? Can Bloomberg buy enough love to stay in the game? Or will that just divvy up the field in a way that gives Bernie enough of a bump to have a close, insurmountable lead? Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show. Continue to comment, support the movement here. Support us at _found FIT_talk show on social media at IG and Twitter. Continue the conversation. Subscribe and like the podcast. Subscribe and like the YouTube channel at youtube.com/race podcast. And get involved, people. Y'all got family in Texas. All my Texas people, if you haven't voted already, go out and vote. Get involved. California people, put that ballot in the mail. We have so many friends in Nevada. In Virginia, Massachusetts that's voting on Tuesday. Colorado. I know we have so many friends that are activists and energized about these elections in Colorado. That seems like the kind of state, if Warren has any state she could make some moves, it'd be a state like Colorado with that dynamic. But we'll see. And I just want to make sure that all of our people, regardless of where they end up, there's 100,000 Latino voters in South Carolina, my friends. We all got family down there, whether retirees. I know our friend Sandra Maria Mazier, I think her parents live in South Carolina, I believe. And we got a lot of friends down there in the African-American community and throughout the, in all sectors. So make sure our friends go out and participate, vote in this process, get their votes heard. And then we'll see what happens after Tuesday. We'll keep the conversation going. We'll have a show on Thursday, a full show, a Found in Translation Thursday evening, and have a wonderful day.